On May 21st and again on May 24th, tens of thousands of Taiwanese joined demonstrations to protest a controversial new bill that is being discussed with limited scrutiny by an alliance of opposition parties, the Kuomintang, or KMT, and the Taiwan People's Party, or TPP. What is this bill? Why is it controversial? And what do the protesters believe is at stake? I'm Shannon Tiezzi, editor-in-chief at the Diplomat, and this is Behind the News. With me today is Chiang Min-yen, who is a non-resident fellow at the Taiwan Economic Democracy Union, which is one of many groups that is helping to organize the current protests. Min-yen, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Shannon.
So to start, could you just briefly explain why do the protesters and Taiwan Economic Democracy Union and its partners find this bill so concerning?
I think the concern about the bill can be divided into two aspects, the substantive level and the procedural level. On the substantive side, the KMT and Taiwan People's Party, TPP, legislature, they hope to expand the powers of Legislative Yuan, transforming the current balance of power between legislative side and executive side. In other words, they want to hold greater control to restrain the newly inaugurated President Lai Ching-te. And furthermore, KMT and TPP also demand Lai Ching-te to give report to Legislative Yuan, allowing legislator to immediately question the president and require the instant responses. And also, they want to have the power to have investigation to NGOs and the normal people. And some of the new bills has been identified by scholars as potentially unconstitutional, but I won't go into details. Among these, a particular concern is that if executive officer believes some questions from legislator involve state secret or the matters about foreign defense, they cannot refuse to answer unless they have the approval from the Speaker of Legislative Yuan. And also, I think on a procedural level, the most concern is there is no civil deliberation by civil society and legislature. And if the questionable part were amended, they would, if they have proper deliberation, I think the Taiwanese society won't oppose to the reform bill. However, now KMT and TPP, they refuse to engage in discussions and they want to directly pass the bill merely by vote. And I have an example. Recently, the Deutsche Welle reporter asked KMT about the new position that there is a concept called counter-questioning by executive officer. But the KMT's answer is they will explain to the Taiwanese public after the legislation is passed. And this response is totally absurd and even anti-democratic. I think the biggest concern for Taiwanese civil society this time is the anti-democratic nature of KMT and DPP. And not to mention, KMT just returned from China and they met with the Chinese official suppressing Taiwan sovereignty in past few days. China has again conducted military exercises around Taiwan, intending to intimidate Taiwanese society. So I think the underlying China factor is also the very major concern behind the bill.
Now, as you mentioned, this bill has been moving very rapidly through the Legislative Yuan. So the protest organizers, including Taiwan Economic Democracy Union, also had to move very rapidly to organize protests. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of organizing the protest and what groups are involved in that?
In Taiwan, civic society has a strong tradition of collaboration. Our civil society group are accustomed to working together in face of major crises. And I believe there are several important factors that contribute to this phenomenon. The first one is Taiwan. We are a very young democracy. During the process of democratization, our civil society had to fight to establish democracy. And we have to unite in order to have a chance of success. Previously, it was about opposing the authoritarian KMT regime, and now it's about resisting Chinese invasion. And we have a common goal. And second point, Taiwan has always been in a state of crisis. We are quite busy on the street. At least since I was 18, I participated in the Sunflower movement, and also 5 years later, the Support Hong Kong movement. And up to now, we must return to the street and to defend our democracy. And because there are many moments that require us to take to the streets, civil society group, we had to learn how to cooperate. And we constantly review how to cooperate more effectively. Final point, Taiwan civil society and civil movement are intergenerational, with the previous generation sharing and they share resources, experience, and the newer generation will review this experience and bring in the new protest tactics and cultures. Because of this legacy, there's a collaboration. And this time, the event is organized by 57 groups and supported by other 33 groups from very different fields. For example, like Taiwan Economic Democracy has long resisted Chinese economic coercion. And we also see labor groups, environmental group, gender movement group, Hong Konger group, transitional justice group, churches, and many others. So it has very diverse set. I couldn't list them all. Yeah.
These protests have been quite large, around 30,000 at the protest earlier this week, over 100,000 at the latest protest on Friday. So how have the KMT and the TPP responded to this immense outpouring of opposition to the bill? Is this impacting what's actually happening inside the Legislative Yuan?
Honestly, I have to say, no impact in the Legislative Yuan, actually. But we have a very strong impact on Taiwanese civil society. Until now, it is very absurd. We didn't see any responses from TPP or from KMT. And because now is during the second reading, so DPP's legislator, they would try to defend their proposal in the process of second reading. And they will mention just outside the building, there are hundreds, thousands of Taiwanese people surrounding us and require us to have deliberation, to have a discussion that makes sense to everyone. But the KMT legislator just laughed to the DPP legislator and saying that it is not important. And they, yeah, just like I have mentioned, they didn't respond to us even in their press conference. And their supporter online, they want to organize their own assembly. But today we saw that they are like low, like just 10 or 20 people standing there. And I think the main reason behind it is they are now driven by the Chinese regime to do so instead of they have to be responsible to the Taiwanese people. So until now, they don't have an intention to speak to us or to have a further discussion with us.
You mentioned earlier one of the major concerns about the bill is the potential for China to have played a role. This is all circumstantial, but the the timing is certainly unfortunate that it was introduced shortly after a group of KMT legislators returned from a trip to China, where, as you mentioned, they spoke with high-ranking CCP officials. Could you just talk us through how this legislation might benefit China? What are some of the concerns about it in terms of China's potential role?
Yes, yeah, I have already answered part of this earlier, but this is a very important question and indeed a focal point. And we have seen in the past that when Chinese economic condition is good, the Chinese regime use strategic like business in circle politics and economic means to promote unification to threaten our entrepreneurs, intending to influence our elections, and essentially they want to buy Taiwan. And like the service trade agreement, which triggered the Sunflower movement, is the very example of how China want to integrate Taiwan into its economic sphere of influence, making Taiwan dependent on China and make us lose our political autonomy. And now I think China is running out of money in some sense, and they have had to turn to managing local forces in Taiwan as well as the KMT and TPP legislator. And these two opposition parties, they are now obtained a majority in our legislature. I think China is quite anxious to see the result of their effort, and they want to annex Taiwan. Ignoring the opposition from some members of KMT, in the case of traveling to China, the chair of KMT caucus, he insists that he want to form a very large delegation to go to China to preach the loyalty to Chinese official. This is what I've seen last month. Now they are even threatening to use the majority in the Legislative Yuan to amend national security law, not only the bills concerning the legislative power, but also the national security law. And they want to create more vulnerabilities in Taiwan to facilitate Chinese intervention. And today, in the civic rally, some scholars also mention this aspect, and the speech by the scholars received a very strong positive response from the crowd. So I think it indicates that Taiwanese people participate in or concerned about this crisis in Legislative Yuan are also greatly worried that the crisis will hasten China's annexation of Taiwan or like further restrict our ability to cooperate with international allies.
So moving forward, what are the next steps for the bill in the legislative process and for civic organizers as they try to rally public opposition to the bill?
Now, Democracy Progressive Party (DPP) they still hold the executive power, and our president is from DPP, and they still have some constitutional tools to counteract the decision made by Legislative Yuan. But I think that is their job. And in today's rally, we also demand DPP, our president, they need to send the whole bill to the constitutional court and to let the judge to see whether some bills is unconstitutional and to cancel the bills. And secondly, we also call the people attending in the civic assembly to think about whether we need to propose a civil referendum on the bill. Because we will have a referendum day next year, so it will be the chance and we can do it. And thirdly, the most important, we will keep going on to watch what KMT and TPP they will do next in the Legislative Yuan, and to explore it is to disclose the information in the Legislative Yuan to make it transparent and to hold the whole Legislative Yuan accountable to the civil society. And until the next election, the local election and the presidential election, I think people will choose which is the best for the future of Taiwan. And it is now what we are doing now. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Min-yen, for keeping us updated on a very eventful week in Taiwan's political sphere. Thank you to everyone at home for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time on Behind the News.